This is a major plot twist that nobody expected because all of you are aware that Levy recently announced that he's taking a break after the match with Pia crumbling until the start of next year. That's when he plans to resume serious working on chess and also playing competitive tournaments, and yet yesterday he did enter a classical tournament for GM Norm. So what happened, he essentially was a substitute for one of the players of a tournament held in the New York City, and he entered the tournament starting round 6. This means Levy is not fighting for the GM Norm in this tournament, but at least he can rack up some precious rating points. So in this round 6, or round 1 for Levy, his opponent was the young talent from USA, Brewington Hardaway, who a couple of days ago was finally confirmed as the latest additions to the Grandmaster ranks from United States since he reached 2500 ELO on live ratings. A very, very tough opponent for Levy. So how did this game turn out? Watch yourself. So Brewington was and is a big practitioner of e4. He decided to open up with Reti. Hardly a surprise for Levy. So Levy played e5, g3, and bishop g4. This is one of the most popular setups against Reti. The big idea is to play c6, knight e7, e6, knight f6, and maybe bishop e7 or bishop d6. Positioning these 3 pawns against the Lasco bishop on g2 makes quite a bit of sense to diminish its potential power. White here played bishop g2, e6, short castle, and knight f6. Here, Brewington played h3. I like this move because this is how I play myself from the white's perspective in similar setups. The idea is to ask black to define the setup of the Lasco bishop. Sometimes white wants to play d3, knight e2, e4. Sometimes white wants to play c4, queen b3, or sometimes white plays d4, c4. So h3 is a pretty smart way to play. Levy played bishop h5, keeping the tension. Now Hardaway played c4, c6, stopping queen b3 idea. You see queen b3 now is going to be simply queen b6, not a problem. d4, Levy played bishop e7, and now knight c3. Now I think here Levy should have started with knight bd7. Instead he played short castle. And now after knight e5 there are some issues with the bishop because g4 to 4 suddenly appears to be a problem. Still, I think it should be alright, and after knight bd7, if white tries to play something like g4, bishop g6, and f4, black will play bishop e4, try to hit the bishop with the bishop on c3, and then anchor the bishop on e4. So the game would have been very, very complex if white had played something like f5. Now instead here, Levy played knight f to d7, which is a bit surprising, but this is a pretty common maneuver in the semi-Slav. So the point is, after the trade, black is bringing the other knight in the game, and he is better equipped to g4 and bishop g6. But there's a downside to this plan. So Hardaway played knight e3 instead, and now you see this black knight on b8 feels pretty weird, and knight f4 is an incoming problem. Levy decided to play d takes on c4, knight f4, and bishop g6. Here Hardaway came up with a beautiful concept. He played h4, and this is a very big threat to play h5 and trap the bishop with e4. Now black cannot play something like h6 or h5 because if you do it like this, look at black's pawn structure, it's just terrible with so many weaknesses in the position. So essentially black had no choice but to counter-strike in the center. e5, knight takes on g6 was the choice by white. Here Engine actually likes d takes on e5, knight e5, and this very unusual bishop h3. I'm not sure who even thinks like that, but again the threat is to play h5. But even if white saw this, it's not so easy to see this line until then. For example, you take it here, you play h6. Okay, Engine for some reason says it's h5, not really sure why it's h6, h5 and not h6. Trade and rook d4. This pawn is pretty difficult to defend, and after b5, bishop g2, white has multiple threats like knight b5, black has problems to continue development of the queenside pieces, and white simply is better. Now that's why here also knight g6 makes perfect sense, and d5 was a good positional choice by Brewington, and here Levy's played knight b6 after a long think. To be honest, I have mixed feelings about this move, because from one point of view I like it, because Levy keeps the position very complex and asks Hardaway a lot of questions. How do you want to win back the pawn on c4? However, I think that knight f6 probably was the safer choice. simply threaten to take on d5 and have a good game. And if white at some point plays bishop e3, now you have access to knight g4. So white could possibly play d takes on c6 and try to regain the pawn on c4 by playing queen a4, but I think here after rook c8, queen c4 and knight e4, black is just very solid. I think that white has a small edge because of this last square bishop on g2, but nothing really dramatic. So Levy played knight b6, so he decided to go for this more complex choice. a4 threatening a5, this has to be stopped, a5. Now Brewington played bishop e3. Again, notice this move probably would be impossible had black had knight on f6, then would be the move knight g4 as a very good resource. Now Levy played rook a6, defending the knight, because again white's threat was to take on c6, take on d8 and kill the knight on b6 for free. Rook a6 is necessary, d takes and b takes. So I think this is the position that Levy wanted to reach from afar. And again, I understand why he did this, because it's not so easy for white to come up with the next moves, because black's idea also is to play like bishop b4, queen e7, rook d8, maybe knight e5, and just keep the pawn. So here Brewington played the correct move, he played queen c2. And after knight e5, he decided to fix black's pawn structure, but now he opens up the position with rook d1, and these two strong bishops are becoming stronger by the minute. So black had no choice, Levy had to play d4 here, and queen c4 was played by white. Actually, engines here said that bishop d2 for some reason is better, stopping rook b6 with bishop a5, but to be honest, even after queen c7, rook c1 and rook c8, black just keeps the extra pawn. Engine says there's something like bishop d5. I'll just say people don't play like that. So that's why here I think queen takes on c4 is perfectly legit move, and after rook b6, bishop d2, bishop b4, I had a feeling that this game is getting to a draw. Why is this? Because if there's a trade on b4, black is always going to finish the development, maybe ideally put the knight on b4, or after bishop g5, bishop b7, bishop e7, queen e7. From afar, I do see knight a6, knight b4 incoming, and in this structure, if black puts the knight on b4, one pawn holds the two pawns, then essentially black enjoys an extra pawn at the center. Well, engine says this is still better for white after something like queen d5, rook takes on b2, followed by rook b1, sacrificing two pawns in a row. This is not so easy to spot for white. So here, Brewington decided to play e3 instead, which makes perfect sense because he has positioned the rook at the d file. And here was a very critical moment of the game. Until this moment, Levy was playing very good. So he had about 20-minute lead on the clock, he had a very safe position, and here I wish he had played the next moves a bit faster. So I'm pretty sure he saw bishop takes on d2, rook b4, hitting the queen, defending the pawn on d4, queen c5 should be the major choice, knight e7 develops the knight and protects the pawn on e5, queen a7. So I would imagine Levy was about here, and he quite did not understand how to continue, because if he plays knight b6, it drops the pawn on a5. Yeah, so queen a5 is a move, and it's very easy to stop right there, even though the engine says black is okay. If black plays knight f6, e takes on d4, followed by something like rook d1, white is seemingly pressing. And yet, this is the moment when Levy could have had very good attacking chance to win the game. So he could have played e4, a beautiful pawn sacrifice, not take the pawn on d4, but threaten with ideas like queen e6, e3, queen g3, knight g4 with a very deadly looking initiative. For example, white could play d5, pushing the pawn, queen d6 blocks the pawn, white could go, I'm not really sure, something like queen e3, knight g4, queen goes back, e3, queen g3. It could be very easy for black to take over the game. Well, engine still says the position is about equal, but if somebody's calling the shots, it's black. Well, unfortunately, Levy missed this very nice idea. Instead, he decided, after 20-minute think, he played queen e7, trying to get to the pawn on a4. And as a rule of thumb, the longer you think, the quality of your thought process decreases, and unfortunately, queen d7 is a mistake. The point is now e takes on d4 was very strong, with the idea that if black takes on d4, white can reject the bishop trade, play bishop f4, and this bishop pair, with strong pressure on the pawn on d4, is just too much for black. I mean, the knight on b8 is so out of the game, and actually here, after e takes on d4, Levy would have to play something like rook c8. I'm not really sure he was planning to do it. Now white can just play queen d3, and after e takes on d4, again, bishop f4 with a very serious pressure for white. Now, luckily for Levy, Hardaway decided to play bishop b4, rook b4, and queen c5, going for the original idea, but now black can just eliminate the pawn on a4. Now what happened is that e takes on d4, rook takes on d4, and I had a feeling the game is once again heading to a peaceful outcome. Everything is going to trade at the queen side, and we are going to have essentially 3 pawns each at the king side. Here Hardaway played quite a smart move, rook e1, applying more pressure, and here Levy had to pick up the correct defense to hold on. I think he had to play rook b4, hitting the pawn on b2, you have to eliminate this pawn, and now after queen a5, queen b5, everything is just rock solid. Bring the knight in the game, put it on f6, trade the a pawn for the b pawn, and just call it a day. Not really sure what happened here. Maybe Levy was ambitious and he played f6, but that's the move I'm very concerned about, because it weakens so many light squares in the position, and even though the engines say that this is a playable move, from a practical point of view, playing such an exposed king's setup in a time scramble is not a good idea. So watch how the game unfolded from here. So he kept the pawn on a5, he decided to give up the pawn on a5, but again the problem is the weakened king. So Hardaway played rook a5, rook c8, and queen b6, threatening rook a7, queen b7. You see now the 7th rank is pretty exposed. Levy had to play knight c6, 3 minutes gone again. Rook a6, threatening again rook a7 if the knight goes. Knight e8 is the only move, stopping the point after rook a7, queen e6. There's no queen b7, an immediate mate. Here Hardaway started to play very quickly. He played queen b3 check, king h7, a nice move h5. The point is, after g takes on h5, bishop e4, there's a lot of problems for black. King h6 is going to be queen e3, g5, rook h7, mate on the board. King h8 is queen f3, queen h5. Again, those light squares are really weak. So that's why Levy decided to play queen b8, and that's the move he made with only 1 second on the clock. H takes, king takes on g6. I had a feeling this is not going to end well. The king is exposed, white is attacking, black has almost no time left. So Hardaway continued to press, queen a3, some queen f8 ideas. Levy played rook c7, tried to trade off some pieces, queen b6, queen a3, queen takes on p2. A very bold choice by Levy, having only 3 seconds on the clock, but again, as a rule of thumb, if it works, and white now has to prove what he has for the missing pawn. So white decided to play bishop e4, king f7, queen f3, threatening queen h5, all kinds of threats, queen h5, queen h8 looks incredibly scary. Levy decided to trade off a couple of pieces, and now we approach the critical moment of the game. Rook a7 check, very unpleasant check, king f8, and I had a feeling this looks so suspicious for black. And indeed, if white had played rook takes on c1, queen takes on c1, and king g2, white still would have been pressing with a lot of threats. One threat is queen h5, queen h8, other threat is queen b3, queen a3 at some point. The rook is on the 7th rank. Also queen g4, queen g7, queen d7, queen e6, etc. Bishop d5 might be also a thing. It's just, from a practical point of view, incredibly difficult to play this, even though the engine says it's a draw. Now instead, Hardaway thought he found the brilliancy. He played queen h5, and his idea was he's sacking the rook on e1, but the mate on h8 is inevitable, right? Well, after rook takes on e1, king g2, Levy realized that he actually has a move queen b3, and now this deals with queen h8 with queen g8, and that's it, black has an extra rook. So here Hardaway realized what he had done, and he made bishop f3 with only 1 second on the clock, because he has to move. Now Levy played rook c1. His idea was pretty understandable. He wants to some point put the rook on the 7th rank and remove this rook. Here Hardaway played queen g6, and here Levy had only 32 seconds on the clock to find a very narrow path to the victory. So the correct move was knight f7, stopping this rank. Rook a8 check is nothing, there's always rook d8, and bishop h5 check. Now black has queen d5 check, only move. White gonna go in the corner, it's gonna be a mate. Bishop f3, the only move is here. On bishop h5, the only move is e3 check. The point is, black is exposing the white king, and after bishop f3, the simplest move is e takes on f2, f1 check is threatening, the white king is exposed, and white has to resign. Not so easy. Levy played the very human move queen g8. Unfortunately, after bishop h5, he cannot parry queen e8 check anymore, because if he plays queen e6, it drops the pawn on g7, that would be a mate. So he realized he had to give a check on d5, bishop f3. Again, you need to protect the pawn on g7. He went back, not to bishop h5. It had to be repeated. And the game was agreed to a draw. So this was a totally crazy time scramble, and I'm super impressed how Levy handled the time pressure, and I think that his mental strength is getting stronger and stronger with every competitive game he's playing, but I think he still shouldn't have played this dubious move f6, exposing the king, and that's why he was suffering in the very end. Although he was winning at some point, Hardaway blundered in the time scramble, then Levy blundered, and I think the draw probably is a fair result. So this was the first of the two games played that day. The second game was not really exciting because that's the game Levy played against the top-seeded player Ilya Nizhnik, and it finished like in 5 minutes. So Levy was playing with the white color. Again, in this tournament, he's not really fighting for a GM norm, except maybe of some rating points. Both opponents found ways to trade off on both bishops. The position is very symmetrical, h3, h6, a3, knight a5, and the game was agreed shortly with a draw. So rook c1, knight e2, rooks disappear, queens disappear, knights disappear, just go home. Stuff like this is completely normal on the road to the Grandmaster title, and sometimes it's also a good idea to take a break after a very thrilling and long game. That's it. If you enjoyed my recap, please press like, write your comments. What do you think about Levy's sudden return to classical chess, even though he already had announced he's taking a break? And of course, if you like my channel, please consider subscribing to my channel, which is going to allow me to create more content. Today, Levy plays 2 more games, by the way, and I'm going to make a recap at some point tomorrow as well. Thank you for watching. Arturs signing off.